Hello.
Hello. Hopefully this is going to work okay. I don't know how well Google videos, Google Meet scales.
Last time I checked, we were like 14 people. How
Yeah.
many do we have now?
I think, yeah, around a dozen. Should be okay, right?
One would hope so.
Nice to see you people in the flesh.
Got to have contact in some way during this time.
Bartek sent out an email on the mailing list yesterday. Were people able to see that agenda?
Yeah, we saw it.
Oh, okay. Great. Kevin woke up very early in the morning to make it. That's nice.
He's on West Coast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually eating something right now, so yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll just wait maybe 3 minutes or so after the hour for people to join. So excuse the awkward silence.
Getting used to it in the year of video conferencing.
Luca, will you record this?
Yep, it's recording as we speak.
Okay, cool.
Video evidence, very useful.
Yeah. If anybody misbehaves, we have evidence. So don't.
let's just wait a couple minutes for people to join. I don't know. I guess we have 14 people on the call. Maybe that's pretty much everybody. Let's give people another 2 minutes or so.
I think Casper's still trying to join.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Does Google only show a maximum of 9 people? Right.
Looks like
think
it's
so.
Oh no, there's
just the same thing.
there's a tiled setting where now I'm seeing everybody, but most people have their cameras off. Maybe I'll just wait for Bartek to get back. Oh, he's back. Okay, well, oh, Satya's trying to join. Cool. Well, welcome. This is our first attempt at having a public meeting, and so thanks for joining. The goal of this. Oh, now Casper's joining. Yeah, so the goal of this is to go over the standard library and kind of painfully look at each of the APIs and decide if they're going to be something that we want to maintain into the infinite future, or if they're something that we need to modify and then keep around, or if they're, oh God, my tea kettle's boiling, sorry. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so anyway, we're going to, this is a bit of an experiment. We're not sure how this is going to go, but yeah, the idea is to have a meeting every other week for the next couple of months, because there are a lot of APIs, and yeah, kind of go through these guys one by one. So Bartek is going to lead this discussion. Just wanted to say beforehand that you know, there's, I guess it's only a dozen people here or so on the call, but you know, having a big open discussion kind of has the potential of getting into bike shedding discussions and side topics. Obviously, I think some amount of that is warranted, but I would just say, you know, let's try to keep the discussions to a minimum so that we can kind of move forward with this as painlessly as possible, I guess. So yeah, I think first, we will be kind of doing some meta discussions about STD in general, like how we're going to version it, how we're going to mark things as either stable or unstable, discussing the scope of STD, trying to decide if we can come up with some discussion of how when things should be in STD and when they shouldn't be, and yeah, generally kind of the organization of the directories. Should we have kind of a flat hierarchy? Should we have a flat file system or kind of a hierarchy? How deep is too deep? That sort of stuff. And yeah, then I think we'll move on to the actual like ratification. And today we only have 2 modules to discuss, just because this is kind of a trial thing and we're not sure how this might go. So we'll discuss async and bytes. And yeah, then we'll just see how this goes, and modify as necessary for the next meetup. So any
Maybe before starting, one more thing. Since we're all around the globe, I think we should set on some times that would be alternating for each meeting, so everyone from each hemisphere has a chance to attend. Because as I understand, it's like 6 a.m. on West Coast and probably around midnight in Far Asia. So if you have suggestions for the time of the meeting, then that would be very helpful. So we can cater to everyone, at least in some degree.
of course, the people who are excluded from this current meeting don't have a say. So yeah, I think the idea is that we'll kind of do an alternating time zone schedule. So every once a month we'll have it in this time zone, and then kind of the alternating the other meeting will have I don't know, 12 hours from now, for example, might be a good choice. It's 9 a.m. for me, so 9 p.m. for example might be a good time.
That's okay for me. 3 a.m. is the perfect time for such meeting.
Maybe we could do like 9 hours from now. Then that would be midnight for you.
Maybe let's just like open some kind of doodle or some kind of poll, and everyone can just state that the interest which hours would be best, and then I guess we'll just like elect the most popular hour.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any input on this?
I think we should probably be asking like somebody who's actually in that time zone, like I don't know, Kitson.
Right. So maybe we should leave this as a to do on the mailing list, so for people who are.
Okay, yeah. So let's just do the poll in the next days, and we'll see how it goes. What time zone is the most popular one? All right. Should we start the actual discussions?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So the first thing on the agenda, and in my opinion, one of the most important ones, is the versioning of the STD. So as you might already know, Dino is at 1.5.4, while STD is still at 0.79, if I recall correctly. And obviously, at some point, we'd like to stabilize the STD. That's the whole point of these meetings. But to do that, we need to decide on some kind of versioning when we actually decide to stabilize it. And obviously, we still need to have a way to designate some APIs as unstable. Because obviously 1 year or 2 years from now, there will be no new APIs that we want to add, and not all of them will be stabilized right away. So in general, we need some kind of agreed on way that specifies which module is actually stable and which is not. My take on this is quite simple. I suggest to add underscore unstable prefix to all the modules that are not yet stabilized. So for example, if we discuss async module today and we decide to stabilize all of the functions but one, then I think we should have async mod.ts with all of the APIs that we consider stable, and then mod underscore unstable that will contain the APIs that are not yet stabilized. The problem with some more structured way of doing that is, well, there's no structure. Everything is just a URL. So I guess we just have to agree on some kind of convention. And yeah, I would love to hear what's your opinion on this topic. If you have any other ideas how we could have some of the APIs stable while keeping some of them unstable.
I've always thought with the versioning that once we made it stable, that we would bump the version of STD back to the same version of Dino that's being released.
Yeah, I agree on this point, although it might be a bit surprising. I think we'll be able to stabilize STD for version 2.0 of Dino, so we'll jump from 0 point something straight into 2.0. But I guess that's the easiest to like make STD versioning follow Dino's versioning. Valentin, just go ahead. No need to raise the hand. I don't even know how to.
Okay, with this many people, I thought it's easier to do it like this. Because of our URL import system, we have the unique situation that we can version parts of the standard library differently, like as modules, unlike, for example, Python, where the whole standard library is shipped with Python, so it needs to be versioned like that. So we could also start versioning every module by its async individually. Then we would still need to stabilize on a module level. So we would need to convention to declare that some part of a module is unstable. But we could now say bytes is completely stable and then bytes is version 1.0, but all other parts of the standard library still have some point version that's considered unstable. Problem is discoverability. Users will have to look up what version is available for what module, and you also need some mapping which Dino version is compatible with which module version. So that's harder to use. Question is whether that's worth the flexibility of having different versions for different parts of the standard library.
If I might have a simple opinion, anything that keeps users away and deters new users for something like versioning, I think we probably should stay away from, even if the trade-off is everything happens to be a higher version number. I would think asking users to, look at a compatibility matrix is asking a lot of users when they just want to do something. But I could be in the wrong. That's just my opinion personally.
Yeah, we have the
I'm
problem.
not even. Go ahead, Ryan.
We have the problem where a lot of the modules in STD relatively reference other modules. So, for example, something in bytes might import ... slash async, probably not, but you know what I mean. Like there's relative references. There's inner STD dependencies in there, and so the question would be, if bytes is at version 32 and async is at version 43, what how is that working? I mean, it's nice to have a single version to say, also they're all maintained in the same repository, so they
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm not sure if we'd be even able to tag them as suggested, and then if registry could handle that. But even though if registry could handle that, that still leaves a question: how do we actually release? Because right now, when a new version of Dino is released, we also add a tag for STD, which affects all STD. And I'm not sure if adding a tag for each of the modules would be a good idea. There's already 20 of them, and I expect to see a few more before we stabilize it. And I also agree with Geoffrey that it's gonna be very hard for users to discover if you need to track a matrix of different versions. So for now, I'd say we should keep a single version of whole STD, as it's just simpler, both from the ops perspective and user's perspective.
I just want to mention that if the registry is capable of everything, so that's never going to be an issue. If you want something, then let me know.
Yeah, I was
We'll
just
figure it
about to say, the way we publish STD should also probably be part of the discussion, because right now everything is in lockstep. If we want to change that, that's another discussion to have.
Do you mean independent releases between standard library and the Dino?
Well, right now, if you want to import standard, right, you import standard at a certain version. So the tag sort of covers everything inside of standard. If we want to start versioning each module separately, they should all have their separate tags, and they should all be published to the registry following their own versioning scheme. So it's something to consider.
It would definitely be a lot more complicated to publish, because we'd have these, we'd have to make sure we publish this one first, and then we update the version in something that depends on it, and then we have to publish that version.
So it seems this versioning each module separately is gonna complicate the whole setup greatly. So I think maybe we can leave this part for now and revisit at some later topic. But I'm much more interested to hear what do you think about stable versus unstable on the same version. So let's say there's STD 1.0, we have HTTP module, and we just added a new API that is not yet vetted, not yet stabilized, but we also have those 20 APIs in server.ts, and how do we make them both coexist while signaling that some of the APIs are not unstable? To reiterate, my suggestion is to add modules with the same name, but then append _unstable suffix to it.
Just a quick question. It's are we sure that all the currently Dino core the CLI unstable API will go away on 2.0? Because if that's not the case, then we will have two concepts of unstable here. Like one is for like using unstable API from the Dino CLI, and one is using the unstable API that is like not yet stable in the
Right.
library itself.
Right. So yeah, this is a very good remark. So as I understand, this is a bit problematic right now because all those APIs are in single modules, and some of the APIs in module may require -- unstable flag for CLI, while some don't. And in my opinion, if some API requires unstable flag, it should also be automatically considered unstable even if we ratify and we're happy with API. It should just stay unstable as long as the underlying Dino API is unstable.
Yep.
I like your idea that you proposed of having like a mod unstable thing. It's very explicit and it's very easy to spot with a custom linting rule as well. So I think it, like from a user perspective, it's very explicit. The one thing though that I'm sure it's going to come up if we go that route is that some modules in the standard use mod.ts and some don't, or some just have a mod.ts and some have a mod.ts and individual endpoints. I'm just cautious about like how we're going to standardize how each module is structured internally to expose something that's like standard and common. Yeah.
That's actually the next point on the agenda that I wanted to discuss. So William pointed out that some of the modules have mod.ts, which re-exports APIs from other modules, and there are some modules that have only mod.ts. And well, this is like another point to discuss. Where should be the boundary? When should a module have this common mod.ts entry point, and when it shouldn't? I'm of opinion that mod.ts is not necessarily needed. For example, if you import file system module, then you pull like 20 different modules, even if you want to use a single utility. On one hand, it makes modules easier to discover because there's a single entry point that re-exports other modules. But on the other hand, now you're pulling all of the code from that module, even if you need only a single function. So I'm not sure if like a hard limit on number of modules in a directory should mandate if there's a common mod.ts, but I'm generally erring on the side that there shouldn't be. So it's easier to, maybe not easier, but it's not ambiguous where's the entry point for a function. So you only have a single place from which you can import it instead of mod.ts and then some submodule, say path.ts. But again, I would love to hear what you think about it and what's your take on it, and how this can connect to the whole stable versus unstable API.
So to add to Bartek's remark that importing one will have to import will pull so much code. It's not just that; it's also that if any of them are unstable or uses an core API that is unstable, then you can't run Deno without an unstable flag, and also that your code would have the unstable APIs in it.
And then everyone's always going to run unstable, and then it becomes useless.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. So,
well, so WebAssembly does kind of the same thing by naming snapshots, like unstable versions, by the actual module name.
I like how I can hear your cats in the background, Casper.
Oh. Yeah, he's in the crate.
Just coming back to this topic of marking modules as unstable by like putting unstable in the file name. There's also this convention we have where we prefix the file name with an underscore to mark it as private. So just wanted to throw out as an alternative to foo_unstable.ts, we could potentially just do _foo.ts.
But isn't that a little ambiguous? Because as you say, underscore is meant to be not for public use, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's unstable.
I agree with that. I think it would be better if there was a single meaning, obviously documented. I think it's documented right now that if module starts with underscore, it's considered private. So throwing unstable modules into the same bag would be very misleading, in my opinion.
I mentioned it in Discord as well, but Go uses the /internal. Like if you want something to be internal, you just put it in an internal folder, and then that would throw warnings when you run it in Go. Obviously, we don't really have that, but it's a convention that's well established in that ecosystem. Maybe that's something we could look into.
Ryan, what do you think? You were the Go enthusiast.
I didn't know about that convention, but it seems, I mean, are people happy, not to divert the conversation from unstable, but are people happy with this underscore convention for private, or is it not explicit enough?
Well, it's very easy to spot, at least. Like you can just search for /_, and if you find /_ anywhere in the URL, you can be pretty sure that it's meant to be private.
But a /internal would be more clear. I do think the point of like bundling together the ideas of unstable and private is probably not such a good idea.
Well, it depends a lot in the intention. If you don't want actually people importing internal modules, because you know, Go is a completely different ecosystem than Dino's. In Dino, we can just see. I can just browse to the STD webpage and I can just look at all the modules. And yes, it can be misleading if we just choose underscore because some newcomer, I'm not sure what the word in English for that is, can just import any module. But I also don't think it's that harmful. So
Yeah. Okay, so circling back a bit, do we all agree that if an API in standard library uses some unstable Dina API, it should automatically be considered unstable and put in this mod_unstable or whatever we agree on? Because this point where if you use a module in STD that's implicitly depends on some unstable Dena API, then you need to pass -- unstable on CLI, and otherwise the code won't compile and pass type checking.
Yeah, I think all code that is stable in STD should run under stable Dino.
Right. So I think this is something we could do actually as soon as possible to like figure out which modules depend on unstable Dena APIs and move them to according modules, because right now this is pretty tricky. If I remember correctly, if you pull file system module, especially the mod TS entry point, like you need unstable flag because quite a few APIs there just require unstable Dena APIs.
Do you know what API is causing that? Is it the Symlink?
Yeah, most likely. I think it's Symlink or
There is another one called UTime. dinner.utime, fs uses utime, copy.ts uses.
UTime we could probably stabilize pretty quickly. I think that's not very controversial.
Symlink's another story, I guess.
Right, but there's also, as you mentioned, Ryan, Symlink, there's also Link and Link Sync. So yeah, I'm pretty sure the FS module in standard library right now requires unstable flag on the CLI. So
we would call
yeah.
it mod_unstable.
Yeah, I think so. And then each submodule, if there are functions that are using some stable APIs and some unstable, then this module should be split into two. And obviously the functions requiring unstable Deno API will go to name_unstable.
I have another proposal. Instead of this mod_unstable, we have a top level unstable folder in std. And then we would have std/unstable/fs/mod.ts. And that way, if you want to import something unstable, you'd have to always go through this unstable folder. And that would also prevent us accidentally importing something unstable from another library with
that's a good point.
I would add a
Go ahead,
prefix or
Kasper.
suffix to the actual module name instead of a single file, like the entire top level directory.
I'm only a bit worried about duplicating the whole structure. Now, when you change or add something, you need to make sure that both trees look the same.
I mean, the unstable folder would only contain the actual unstable APIs. All the stable APIs wouldn't be duplicated in the unstable folder.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But say HTTP module has like two or three levels deep. So then if there are some unstable APIs there, we need to duplicate this 2 to 3 level deep structure and an unstable directory. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good idea as well. So I guess we'd have to sketch out both proposals in an issue and reach consensus there and move on with discussion.
I'm sorry, I had to disconnect for a few seconds, a few minutes. Did you already talk about decoupling Deno and std releases?
No, right now we're discussing how to make modules in standard library present themselves as requiring unstable Deno APIs and those that do not require unstable Deno APIs.
Okay, but that is something that will be discussed today, right?
Do you mean decoupling the versioning of
Yes.
CLI and standard library? Well, for now it's pretty much decoupled. There's we just bump one and the other accordingly. However, before we stabilize standard library, we will have to discuss this issue, but for now, I think it's a bit too early to do that.
Okay.
If I understood correctly, you mean you'd want to have like a free releases of standard library and only a single release of CLI, or even there will be no release of. Okay.
Because lately I've been noticing that I mean, Daniel obviously releases a ton of things between each release, like 10 fixes, 20 features. Well, let's not exaggerate, but yes, it's quite active. But in the terms of STD, I think we are, and this is something Brian discussed like in July in a conference about Deno, that the diamond scheme of dependencies. Right now, the more STD versions that are being published, the more that tree is growing, because I use a library that uses the version 78 and one that uses 68, and then I have two different versions of STD. And yeah, I'm kind of concerned that because Dino is releasing that often, but STD isn't seen as many changes as Dino is seeing. We are kind of that whole dependency system is branching too much. It's duplicating.
Okay, so just so everyone's on the same page, historically, standard library was a separate repo, but like more than a year ago, we actually merged it back into the main repo. And that was done to ensure that STD works with the latest Dino, but actually I recently suggested it to Ryan that maybe we should reconsider moving standard library out to a separate repo again. And then what you just discussed, Stephen, would be way easier to achieve. And to be honest, there's not so many changes in the public API of Dino that we actually need to test it against master. I think if we just tested it against latest CLI release, and then a day or two later fixed anything, if there are changes before releasing STD, that could work as well. And it should make easier to contribute because Dino now is a huge repo, and moving just the TS code to a separate repo for STD might make it easier for contributors to work only on STD.
As to this diamond import problem, so there's all these versions of STD, and even after we stabilize, it's going to be STD version 1.6.3 or whatever that you might be linking to. It would be very nice if once we're stabilized, then supposedly we can guarantee that that if you're linking to an STD library, that that it's compatible, that all versions of this, all stable links are somehow compatible. So potentially what we could do is have links that are like dino.land/std at 1 or at 1 point. Basically do the semver resolution with HTTP redirects. So STD at version 1.5 would redirect you to the latest version in the 1.5, the latest 1.5 version of STD, for example, which hopefully will solve this diamond problem.
Another way we could maybe solve it is if we move it back to a separate repo, we could always like retag the same commit if standard hasn't changed between two Dino releases. And then when we serve, for example, 2.1 and 2.2, well, they're both pointing to the same tag. They both have the same content hash, right? So that gives the tool to the Dino CLI to know that even though the versions are different in the URL, the content that's being served is the same, and it could be cached at the same place on disk. Maybe I'm just riffing and this doesn't make sense, but I don't know. I think it might be possible. There might be something to do there.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the same alley that Ryan was talking about. So the Semver versioning, except for it wouldn't be Semver, it would be just instead of doing this with Semver, we'd do this with like hashing the content and then seeing if the content is the same. And if the content is the same, we'd be serving, like ultimately we'd be serving the same file from the same URL through some redirect.
All right, so I guess we have discussed this pretty much in detail. I'm taking notes and will later translate it into an issue so we can discuss further. So the ideas for versioning right now are either use underscore unstable suffix for module names or add unstable top level directory that would mimic the structure of STD. And the other topic we just discussed is possibly moving standard library to a separate repo to decouple it from CLI. So standard library does not have to be released when Dino CLI is released. All right, shall we move to the next point then? So this one's gonna be fun, I think. So standard library has quite a few modules already, but I'm sure you'll notice that some modules you'd expect in there are not there. And the question is, how do we decide if a module should make it into standard library or not? So what are the heuristics to adding new modules to standard library as we go? And I'm just gonna give my opinion here first, which is pretty simple. If some kind of module is in, say, top 500 of downloaded NPM modules, then it might be a good idea to include it in standard library. Obviously, this is very crude heuristic. Like, I'm sure there are like, I don't know, GraphQL drivers or Postgres drivers that are in top 500 in NPM, but obviously they would not make sense to bring them into STD. I am talking about general purpose modules that implement some well-defined protocols, so like HTTP or SMTP. And yeah, so that's my crude idea. What is your opinion on this one?
So
Yeah,
number one would be an implementation that's actually working and well tested.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That
think
seems very reasonable.
I think kind of the sweet spot is to find something that's stabilized, like Gazprom said. And I mean stabilized as in it has a standard, like SMTP. That recently there was an issue about why it was not being merged, and I think it was Naeem who opposed to it because he didn't thought that it actually was meant to be in the STD library. I think the sweet spot is between how many people are using it and whether or not it's gonna change. I mean, if it's stabilized and if it's standardized, I think it's the word. Then it can be included into STD. But then things like URLs and things that are commonly used but not necessarily standardized, that's kind of the thing that I don't know how to handle in STD.
Yeah, I think I'm also like mentioned like a long time ago in some issue that I had this idea of like having a module kind of election process where people can propose a certain like some kind of RFC where it's proposed like we want to include this certain module and probably some prospective API and even including a like basic implementation so other people can view and consider if it's okay. Then we can consider like and we can put out this thing as an issue and like or have a like a voting process where other people can vote and decide on if it exceeds some kind of threshold, then we can probably include into STD. And another thing I was thinking about is because even like as what like Bartek mentioned about like maybe we include modules that are like using top 500 modules for NPM, it's still going to be a lot of modules. So there's also the problem about maintenance. Like it's hardly possible for somebody to be like really like familiar with one topic to even to work on something like cryptography. So I was thinking about maybe we should also consider about how the ownership like model should be constructed. Like if separate modules should have their own set of their like kind of like there's a smaller governance, but then it's also like eventually when it decide to release it can context the upper like higher level of governance. And yeah, so this allows like easier general management. So this is just like one idea that I had a long time ago actually.
Right. So like Chrome has the owner's file in each directory, I think, where you can. By the way, how does Rust has this RFC process? Is anybody familiar with how this works? No.
Well, one more thing is that Dino's STD is a loose port of Go's standard library, and I'm pretty sure we're still missing quite a few modules from Go's standard library. So I guess it would be safe to err on the side of checking what's inside Go's standard library, and well, discussing if a certain module makes sense in Dino's context. So one module that I think would not make sense, at least now, is the DB interface, although I know a lot of you would love to see it, but I think we need more mature drivers before we can undertake like unified interface for DBs in Dino. But yeah, I suggest we also take a look at Go standard library and see which modules we're missing from Dino's standard library.
Yeah,
I actually did that very recently, and like just as a quick overview, I think we've got pretty much all of the ones that make sense in Dino. Like the ones we're missing were sort of iffy, like we don't really need them in Dino, but we can always recheck.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at the list right now. I mean, for example, like archive/zip might be a useful thing to have if anybody ever wanted to implement that. I would say like anything that's in the Go standard library is definitely fair game for Dino's standard library since they're so closely related.
Well, we already have an archive. It just doesn't have zip.
It doesn't have
GZIP,
zip,
so,
right?
so fair game, yeah.
It also, the Go standard library also kind of defines a hierarchy structure, which is reasonable. I mean, whatever, it's something. And so, that kind of gives us a something to look at when talking about how we should organize things.
Well, we do follow Go standard library in Dino standard library, but obviously there's a lot of other languages that have standard library. So I think we shouldn't reject the idea of reaching into those other languages. I've been working mostly with Python, which has enormous standard library. Obviously, not everything there is great, but it's there. So I guess like research between Rust or Python or Ruby, especially especially in scripting languages, might give us good pointers what we're missing. But obviously, the first thought of mine was the npm index because, well, Dino is JavaScript and TypeScript runtime, and JavaScript and TypeScript developers go to npm very often. So yeah, but this is just my idea, and it would have to go through a serious sieve. What could make it from npm, because I'm pretty sure in top 500 we're gonna find stuff like is promise, is number, is odd, etc. And well, maybe it does make sense to have them in standard library if users were to write those modules and then release them in Denoland X, then probably we could just include them in STD so they don't have to go through the whole trouble of it.
I think if anything like that ever happens at the registry, I think the registry would have like an accidental downtime, which would like accidentally delete those modules from the index. Like, who knows how that happened, but
accidental, yeah.
Yes. Right, but I think what's important is that we define some heuristics. Like we don't want to include anything that has like opinions attached to it. Like it shouldn't be highly opinionated. It should be instead stuff that is specified, that has a specification, which isn't something that's already defined through a web API or through a JavaScript API, or potentially even upcoming JavaScript APIs. Like if we want a very extensive time standard library module, if we know that that whatever the new
Temporal.
temporal is coming, and it'll be able to solve most of those things too. Things that we want, like things that we add to standard library will have to be maintained for a long time, and if it's just duplicated with something that's coming up in JavaScript soon, then probably doesn't make a lot of sense. And same with the like internationalization APIs of time as well. There's like we don't have them implemented currently, but we could. I mean, at that point, does it make sense to have all these in the standard library module as well?
I like Kevin's idea about having like an RFC process, because even if we do have heuristics in place for like what we decide to merge in or not into standards, there's always going to be somebody who's like, why is this or why is like that not in standards? So having something that we can point to and say like, well, this is the process we do it to, and these are like the current open proposal is something that's could be really beneficial.
We could copy TC39 for that. Basically, just that we don't have we have several implementations that need to exist step.
Or wait 5 years for something to be implemented.
I mean, we don't need the timescale either, because we're not writing a specification. We're just trying to include something. But I mean, parts like need to have a prototype. You need to have the interface defined. Stuff like that makes sense for a library. And the last step is getting it through some council. We need to figure out what that whether that would be.
Well, obviously we don't want to make it too formal, at least for now. But yeah, the RFC, I think this proposal is pretty good. It would be definitely beneficial to have a concrete discussion with some API sketching before tackling some bigger modules. Obviously, not everything can be caught in the RFC, but it should definitely make the quality of contributions higher. Okay, so yeah, maybe let's circle back a bit to the topic of the hierarchy of standard library. We scratched it a bit when talking about versioning, but I think it warrants a bit more discussion. So right now, it's a bit unclear what are the guidelines, how to structure the directories. Some of them have mod.ts, some of them don't. Then there's a question of how big is a module. We're going to go through async module a bit later, and in there you can see there are like 4 or 5 modules that contain essentially a single function each. And in my opinion, it doesn't really make sense to have 4 or 5 different modules in there if they have just a few functions. When you download the code, then you need to do like 4 or 5 requests instead of a single request. So like it would just be faster to acquire the standard library code if it was in a single module. But async module is pretty simple one. It does not have many APIs, but if we look at file system or HTTP, then those modules are huge. There are tens of files in there. But again, we come back to this problem that if you link to file system /mod.ts, you're pulling everything, even though you only need like a single utility function. So yeah, it'd be great to hear what's your take on structuring. What is the boundary where we should start splitting a directory into multiple modules, and when it should be just a single module. Some time ago, if I recall correctly, Naim made an effort to unify it and add mod.ts to every directory. But again, I'm not super happy with that because I believe in some modules it just doesn't make sense to have mod.ts and then multiple small files. Yeah, so what do you think about it?
In most cases, I agree, but there's like the odd ones that it kind of makes sense to have mod.ts. I'm just looking at bytes right now, and it's so small, it would sort of not make sense to have individual files, or I don't know how I would separate these functions into separate files. So yeah, I don't know if there's a clear-cut answer here.
Yeah, I think
I've
it
seen
depends.
this.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I've seen the structure of a file system. I've seen it's actually split into little files, and usually those little files have like two functions. One that's sync, one that's async. It's not like that in all cases, but I think that's kind of the what's the word for it in English? Sorry. But usually it all comes down to what user experience, because yeah, if I see mod.ts in a folder, I usually don't just go look at all the files to know if it's worth it or not have it. I usually just notice it when I notice that Dino just pulled like 40 moles, and I just go wow. So I don't know. I think the question is more, how do we make users more aware of what they are actually pulling when they are doing that mod.ts file? Because again, as a user, I don't want to know in what file do I need to pull to, as an example, go get the mtbr sync module. If I see an interior file, I may guess it, but there are modules like, give me a minute, like path that, for example, I was looking for the resolve function, and I have no idea in what file that is. So I guess what I'm trying to say is a common convention for trying to separate these different models is one, having mod.ts for the people that want to pull the model, and for those that not, just simply do that separation in files. If you have the resolve function, just create a resolve file and re-export it in the mod.ts file.
I also think it depends heavily on what actual module it is. Like HTTP, the HTTP module only really has the function of creating an HTTP server. And if you import that function, you're probably going to start an HTTP server. But the async module that has 4 different functions in it, and those are like completely separate from each other. Like one of them is defer, the other one's pooled map, and then there's 2 other ones. There's a lot of use cases where you only want one of those and not all 4 of them. So I think it like heavily depends on what the actual use case is of the module as well, if it makes sense to have a mod.ts or not. Is it like
yeah,
Go ahead.
I have another like an extreme suggestion, because having one mod.ts brings in so many problems. Can we do something like have all of them separate? Like part.resolve would have its own module, and part.relative would have its own module, but at the compiler level itself, give a way to include multiple of them without having to explicitly specify the URLs. I understand that Deno has this whole URL thing, and it's kind of it's good that it's like that. But if we could somehow, like how we can import, I think in Python we can specify OS dot and then have multiple of them, together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be tied to ECMAScript import semantics, so there's really nothing we can do about that.
we could do some magical server thing where you say, I need this function, this function, this function, and then on the fly we concatenate all the files that you need into a single bundle and ship it to you. But that has the like downside that that is like highly you're gonna have a lot of duplicates in your module graph. Then we don't have this nice diamond shape anymore. We have all these bundles, which we don't really want. This cat
Bartek,
is great.
Bartek, you were worrying about kind of too many requests, and so like worrying about having too many small modules because that's going to create more requests. But there's kind of a worry on the other side where that if we have, you know, modules with many functions in it that are unnecessary, that actually has its own overhead. And to me, I would be worried about having unnecessary code in my runtime versus making extra requests when I start up, because ultimately I'm probably going to be bundling my program, and it's kind of well, I guess, you know, hopefully the code that I'm not using gets tree shaped out. But you know, when I'm running this program, I guess if I'm not bundling, like extra code has in JavaScript has runtime overhead.
Right. You're obviously right that it's probably better to do multiple requests instead of pulling one single huge file because of the whole parsing compilation overhead. And if you're not gonna use 95% of the functions in that module, that's just waste, and you pay the price every time you start the runtime. So I definitely agree with you on this one. I guess Lucas' opinion that it just depends on the module is the best one for this problem, because yeah, some modules are just small, like async, and have 200 lines in total over 4 files, but HTTP has like 1,000 lines in a single file, and there are 10 files, so probably we don't want to concatenate them into a single one and make user like start up with a huge file that is never really used besides a single function. So I guess this topic is just gonna have to be punted down the road and revisited sometime, and we just keep the status quo as is for now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the module, and so I guess we'll discuss them as we get to each of the modules. I think for FS, for example, it does make sense to have an individual module with a sync and async version, so that I can pull in, you know, whatever read file. I don't even know what the modules in there are, but I think having very small modules in the file system thing makes sense.
Right.
And that's also one thing that we have to be careful of when one of the other modules in SCD pulled something from file system. We don't want it to reference the mod.ts, even though it's just going to use a single file, because then we're going to download this entire tree, even though we just need one function.
Yes.
And also breaking it down the most that you can, it gives a lot of room for optimization, because I mean right now I can be just pulling I don't know what the function for creating a directory in FS is, but I can just say mod.ts, and then I look at my code and say, oh, I'm only using this one function, then I can just reference that one file and optimize it down the road.
Yeah. Like I think I know for me personally that if I want something for the path module, I'm going to pull in the entire thing, because I can't be bothered to figure out which one of the actual functions I'm actually going to use. I'm just going to do star as path and then do path.join or whatever. But there's definitely use cases where you don't want to be doing that.
Okay, so let's keep status quo now. Obviously, I will write down all those thoughts we just had. Shall we move to actually reviewing those modules, the async and bytes? So those modules are very small, and this is on purpose for today. So I'm going to show you how we did review the APIs in Dino namespace for the 1.0 release, and we're just gonna repeat the same process, which is, well, we just open doc Dino land and start going through the APIs one by one, discussing them, either vetting them or deciding what changes need to happen before the API could be considered stable. And I'm going to note what we're gonna review in my notebook, and then later I will update the code accordingly just by adding comments to the JS doc. If you ever used doc Dino length, you probably saw that some APIs have like capital unstable with a short comment why the API is not in the stable namespace yet. So let me share my screen. And please tell me if the font is big enough, or should I zoom in a bit more?
I'd say zoom in some more.
Okay. How about now?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Yeah, so let's start with the async module. Let's see, we have 4 modules here plus mod.ts. So let's start with mod.ts and see what's in here. Okay, this is just re-exporting all of the stuff, so nothing really to review in here. So let's go to the third and open the documentation page. Is that readable as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so the third module is quite simple. It has only a single function and a single interface that are exported. And well, the third is basically a wrapper around promise that exposes reject and resolve methods on the object. Well, this code is quite prevalent in the internal runtime code. Of course, it's not from STD, but it's the same code as in STD. I haven't seen really any changes to this code once it was written first time. And well, not sure if there's really much to discuss for this API. It's quite straightforward. That said, does anyone have any objections or something should be changed? Oh, there's a to-do from Rai from some time ago.
And I also remember there was some discussion about a performance issue a long time ago about this. So yeah, I would like to hear that again, probably.
Right. Oh, that's actually a very good point. So in here we got this return object assign, and if I recall correctly, that was the performance problem, and instead it should be just promise dot resolve equals resolve and promise dot reject equals reject, because it's faster. Yeah, so I guess we'll have to update that.
And then one thing, I don't know if there's like, we should check if there's a TC39 proposal for this, because this seems like something that would be like a promise.deferred function. It's something that would exist.
Okay, good point.
But other than that, looks good to me.
I don't remember making this to-do comment, but it seems I'm saying that that there should be that this should inherit from a class. Does anybody understand this?
So yeah, basically I was playing around with this yesterday. Instead of basically make the deferred itself as a class, I think, and sort of instantiate that, have a default implementation for, you know, basically you can either instantiate the class or you can call the deferred function. Both should work the same thing. Yeah, that's about it. And the problem is that the you've written it sort of concisely, I guess. The problem is that ES5 targeting ES5 will produce broken code, and the issue is still closed. I checked it yesterday.
But we don't target
Um,
ES5 anymore.
Yeah, is that a concern to us? Well, it definitely would be great if some subset of standard library could be used in browsers as well. But before that can happen, we have to like support on-demand transpilation of standard library, which I'm sure Luca will say that it's like half an hour of work, but we still
No.
don't have it yet. Okay, so I guess in case of this deferred, we want to check if there's TC39 proposal for some kind of spec API, like maybe promise.deferred. Other than that, we want to fix the problem with this object assign, instead use direct assignment of both functions. And after that, I guess this API could be potentially considered stable.
Do we want to make this into a class?
Not sure.
Well, it would let us remove this function. We'd only have a single export then. And the way to instantiate it would just be new deferred, I think.
Okay.
I don't care about ES5. I don't know if anybody else does, but
No. Like all the browsers that anybody should use support ES6, so like anybody who targets ES5 can like, not my problem.
Well, in Dino, it isn't really an issue, to be fair.
Okay, so we should also explore if this function can be turned into a class. Okay, let's move to the next module then.
Yeah,
Delay.
whoever works on this can contact me. I kind of wrote the code yesterday, so I'll just post it on Discord.
Okay.
It'd be great if you could just open a PR, then we can discuss there.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, let's go to delay. Okay, this one is even better. Yeah, well, I just want to say that this one is pretty useful and it's used quite a lot, so I wouldn't mind if it ended up in Dino namespace, but on the other hand, we rather not add API that is pure JavaScript that does not call Rust side. So I guess we'll just stick to the delay module as it is, and I'm pretty sure this one could be considered stable.
As in, we already have this lip sync. I mean, I know that's an OP and that yes, this will be pure JavaScript, but yeah, this is used quite often actually. This I wouldn't mind, though I'm not a maintainer, but I wouldn't mind having this as sleep in the Dino namespace.
Right. The issue is that when people use that, they're going to use dino.delay or dino.sleep instead of just using the native JavaScript implementation, which would make all the code which doesn't actually rely on the Dino namespace for anything else incompatible with the browser, just because it relies on this Dino namespace function. So I think we should really stay away from any like JavaScript only implementations in CLI namespace.
One other comment is that we added this sleep sync in the runtime API. maybe we should either rename this one or rename the other one so that it's delay sync or this one into sleep, because they're essentially the same thing.
Problem is sleep. The problem is the sync pool. The one sleep sync will block everything, and this one is just a promise awaited in the event loop. So
Yeah, there's one more thing about sleep, and the sleep sync is obviously, well, it just sleeps and block the event loop, but we had a talk about adding so-called unref timers. So a timer that does not block event loop from exiting, because both set interval and set timeout will block the event loop. So if all of the code is done, but there's still a pending timeout, the runtime will keep going. But dino.sleep could be so-called unref op that you schedule a sleep, but if there's nothing else to do, then the event loop will not wait for this sleep. So it could be useful in tests, I guess, to implement test timeouts. Yeah, I guess in general, those non-blocking timers could be pretty useful in the future. So and it would be a completely different op than set timeout or set interval, because it has to have this semantic of not blocking event loop, and this is fully done in Rust. So any objections about this API being stable?
Let's
Okay.
stabilize it. Yes.
Yeah. Moving on. Mux async iterator. Oh wow, this one is.
There's some issue I had with it about its naming mostly.
It wasn't,
Because
I remember adding that. It was not really intended to be public. It was just, a utility used in HTTP, I think, or WebSockets maybe.
Yeah, I think this one is used in HTTP server to multiplex the connections. Does any one of you use this outside of HTTP?
Yes, I do, for a bot that runs on 2 different chat networks in parallel, and I just fetch like messages from both networks over, multiplex those together and fetch them through this.
Okay, that's good to know. Any opinions on the API? Have you had any problems with it?
It worked fine for me.
yeah, I mean, the name is a little bit confusing because like it's Mux async iterator, but implements async iterable. So yeah, kind of mixed up the terms between iterator and iterable here.
What would you call it?
Like Mux async iterable, or basically it kind of should align with the thing that you implement.
I think the reason was because it multiplexes iterators, right? No, the name is indeed not beautiful.
Yeah, and also the add part, like that add function call, add method call, like, yeah, maybe we can also support it, like, because currently it only takes like an iterator of type async iterable iterator, which is actually a pretty strict type definition than other ones. So it's just, yeah, I think there's some like interface and like naming reworking has to be done on this one.
Yeah, it's an iterator, or it's an iterable that has a method called iterator that you can use to get an iterator from iterable.
Yeah, async iterator mostly like something like like an async generator that does implement this, I think. But yeah, but if other types, then there's going to be some issues because, yeah, because either you can pass in an iterator and it's totally like async iterator is then totally fine for us to iterate through, and also like maybe async iterable in this case. So.
Sounds like not stable.
Yep. But it's good to know that someone uses it actually. Okay, pool.ts. Let's see the docs.
Wait, so what was the conclusion with this, or can we not?
Not
We're-
stable.
Uh,
That's the conclusion.
Not stable. Okay.
Not stable, the name is confusing, and it should take a less strict type for the add method instead of async iterable iterator.
Okay. And so just a side comment. So HTTP, for example, relies on that class, I think.
Yes.
And if for example, we make HTTP stable, I guess my question is it, we had this discussion about if unstable APIs, if stable APIs relied on the runtime unstable flag, that they should be actually unstable. And I'm just wondering if this kind of also happens with interdependencies in STD. If HTTP relies on an unstable API, that's not going to make HTTP unstable necessarily, right?
If that's like an internal dependency that HTTP uses, I think it should be unstable as well. And why do I think HTTP is a bad example? Because it's probably the furthest from being stable of all APIs in STD.
Mm. Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that you could potentially stable APIs could have internal dependencies on unstable APIs.
I guess if it's like completely internal and those dependencies are not somehow exposed to you interact with,
I don't know.
Okay.
I'd rather
it's
not.
gonna be really
I'd rather,
blurry.
yeah, I'd rather just copy the, like, for this case, I'd just rather copy the implementation into a private module in HTTP
Yeah.
and then
otherwise
deduplicate it once it becomes stable.
I see.
Otherwise, we'd also need to make sure that the currently unstable dependent upon module does not add any unstable or CLI unstable calls so that it becomes unusable.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, that was a bit of a side topic.
I think it's
Okay,
important.
so pooled map. I think this is from Luca.
Yeah.
Yeah, but can we maybe somebody read the what this does, because pooled map
Yeah,
doesn't
okay,
make any
so-
sense to me.
Pooled map transforms values from an async iterable into another async iterable. The transforms are done concurrently with a max concurrency defined by the pool limit.
So it's sort of like the map function on an array, except for it runs a certain amount of the maps in like concurrently.
I guess maybe a worker map would be like more appropriate because you give it an async interval and a number of workers that you want to perform the transform operation. But as far as the functionality goes, I really like this one. It's really useful.
Yeah, but it doesn't go over workers. It just does it in parallel on the same thread.
So maybe you just parallel map.
Yeah, I was thinking, I think I said limit map when you made it.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was.
Concurrent map?
Or concurrent map.
I remember this one was copied from a library called async pool, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's called limit map in async and on npm.
Yeah. I mean, something like
Possibly, yeah.
maybe concurrent map is also fine because I think like parallel is like a really
Parallel implies something
strange
different,
word
so-
we use here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
It's also not strictly speaking a map because you could pass it a readable stream that has no end and it would just consume it. Whereas like array.map assumes that the array is full and you like the range of value is known.
Yeah, I see what
This
you
is getting
mean.
into semantics, but yeah.
I see what you mean, but I think there's a proposal, a TC39 proposal that adds maps to like the regular map function that we have for arrays to iterables and async iterables as well. So I think this isn't like I think semantically
I
this is
know what
probably
you're
fine.
talking about, Luca, but I don't think there was a method that takes like a limit of the concurrency.
Yeah, exactly. That's why this exists, because it doesn't exist anywhere else. I just mean that
so-
the name map like doesn't only apply to arrays, it also applies to iterables and iterators. Like there's TC39 has sort of established that, although it's like not ratified yet, but
Okay, so my takeaway from what I heard is that this is in general very useful API, but we have some heavy bike shedding on the name before we could stabilize it.
sure.
It's always bothered me that the file name was pool and that the function is pooled map. Seems like those should also, not
Yep.
to add to the bike shedding, but
I mean,
Yeah,
we
I
could
think
add
it was
something like pool.
renamed. It was
Sorry.
renamed during the pull request a couple of times, I think.
Yeah.
One could add pool reduce or something in the future.
okay.
Yeah, we could.
So that would
Although I
mean
heavily
just call this
dislike
pool, or
I
just
don't
call
know.
this map.
I like the concurrent map. It's very well tells you what it does. It's concurrent and it's a mapping functionality. But yeah, I will obviously I will write that down in an issue and let's bike shed on the name there. Okay, cool. So it seems we're done with the async module. Just quick look at the README if everything's here, and it seems it is. Yeah, but there are untagged imports, so I'm gonna write that down as well.
And one other thing about that, do we want to keep the mod.ts or do we remove it for this module?
I would say remove it, right? Because all of these are so unrelated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree on that. And again, should we just remove it or should we just make those 4 APIs into a single mod? That's not so much code, but obviously, as Ryan said, they're completely unrelated, so might as well stay in separate modules.
If I want delay, I don't want to pull in mux async iter.
Yeah.
So I would say just remove the mod TS.
Naeem's gonna love it.
Well, he's not good to state his opinion.
But I think maybe delay or something can also just move to something like a timers module. I don't know if you have that. But I'm thinking about Python. You know, there's the iter tools module. They put everything together. I think it makes discovery, for example, a lot easier than having
I agree.
Everything that operates on an on an iterator like spread out between like, file, net, OS, etc.
Well, we can always update the registry to like crawl all the files in here and sniff out public API to show it unified in here to make discoverability easier.
Yeah. But the idea of having a timers module, we definitely don't have that. I guess
so
the question is I think Bert's point is like sorry if I got that wrong, but whoever's point was that delay in the async folder maybe doesn't make so much sense.
Right, but on the other hand,
Yes.
can you think of some other APIs that would be related to timers and end up in standard library. I think, Ryan, you were for a few minutes absent when we discussed this Dino sleep sync, that there's also a discussion about Dino.sleep that would be this unref op that wouldn't block event loop from exiting. But again, it would be in the Dino namespace. So is it really worth to have timers module just for a single delay?
Maybe not, but I mean, I'm just saying it's not really appropriate here. Like,
Well, I mean, you're delaying for an asynchronous period of time, kinda like it's something you would await on, so it kind of makes sense.
That's true,
Just
but
going-
you know, FS open, you await, and then you get like the file descriptor, so it also goes here. I mean,
Just
I mean,
squint
we-
and it'll make sense.
yeah, everything goes here. It's done. So, yeah.
Coming back
said,
to
we just move
Bartek's-
everything to the async folder.
Coming back to the Bartek's point, what could go in time? We could look for this, in other like Python's time module. There's a bunch of stuff like clock set time. I mean, there is nothing which is already implemented, I guess, but we could have these things in time if you are looking. If your question was that, as in what could go in a time
Well,
module.
I think if nobody's asking for something, then maybe we don't have to invent it. But so yeah,
Yeah.
there's Rust puts it in like standard process or standard thread or something. That could also be an option if like there's really nowhere else to go with this delay thing.
Okay, so maybe one more remark as we're actually going through those modules. So I think stabilizing APIs is one thing, and we're doing that right now, but I'm starting to grow a feeling that we'll have to like go through all of this once again just to figure out the directory structure once we agree what's to be stabilized, just to address those issues that were just raised, that maybe it should be in timers module or whatever. So the API is good. The API could be considered stable, but it might as well move to some other module before the whole STD is stable. Does that sound okay?
So are you suggesting that we would mark it as stable but might be moved?
Yeah, but I mean,
the URL
if we,
is the actual function is stable, but the location
yeah,
is
exactly.
not.
Because the STD right now is 0.79.0, it's like the whole STD is still unstable. We decide that this API is good, it's okay, we don't want to change it, but like before the whole STD gets stabilized, stuff might move around a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do that. Like, if I have to change my code, you said it was stable, but then it, it goes away basically and shows up somewhere else, and I have to edit my code other than the version number of SCD. Then I we're not treating it as stable.
Okay.
I mean, we can say the API, we think this API is good. It's just not in the right place, but yeah, you just basically want to keep the interface the same so people don't have to change their code when they upgrade. That's what stable means, right?
So yeah, I mean, I am in agreement with Bert's point that this async module is a bit ambiguous and kind of a catch-all for it's basically like our miscellaneous folder. And it would be nice to kind of have delay in a better place, but I think we're all eager to stabilize something. So maybe we should, we should kind of take proposals for moving this around somewhere.
Yeah, and another option would be to just stabilize it here in where it is now, and then later on, I don't know, not deprecate it and like, also export it somewhere else and put that in the docs. But like just, keep the async module for backwards compatibility or something.
Okay, noted. Let's move to the bytes module. Okay, so we have a single mod.ts in here. Let's see the docs. Okay, function concatenate two binary arrays and return a new one. Param origin array to concatenate. Param b array to concatenate with origin. I'd say this origin is not so great. I mean, origin and b are a bit, well, maybe it could just be a and b instead of origin and b.
But that's not necessarily part of the interface. I wouldn't be upset if somebody changed that.
Or you can concat more than just two, because theoretically it's like also be useful. And also another thing that I want to mention is like, should we align all these API calls closer to the array interface? Because like we have now like concat, we have find index, and like while array has like index of and other like names, like has suffix, has like starts with, has suffix with like ends with, like all these. Yeah, bike shedding of the names again.
Yeah, but you're bringing up the points I also wanted to bring up.
Yeah, the other question
so
I have is maybe like we want to implement them on the generic typed array and not so specifically on a byte array, because what if we do whatever concat for uint32 array, but we have like keywords as another module or something? How does it work?
That should probably be on an array like instead of what is it? It's byte array.
It is.
Then
It is.
it's in the
The
wrong
folder
module
is
again,
called
so-
bytes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ryan, what I'm saying is like these functions, they will work just great on any type array. It's but yeah, if we did support that now, it'd be very weird. Then we would have to add also in 16 in 16, like
right.
double.
Okay,
so maybe we should rename this folder to like typed array
or binary.
No,
okay, so one point is that
arrays.
these APIs should not only operate on uint8 arrays, but in general on typed arrays. So actually be generic. And the other point made by Kevin is that the names could better resemble APIs on the actual array type. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And the third point is that you could probably take one source and one target and multiple sources.
One target. Okay, yeah.
But that's similar to be more like the array API, right?
Yeah, that would be array concat basically.
Yeah, and actually like this concat doesn't like really make any, like it's basically just joining them and putting them into a new uint8 array. So there's not really a difference between origin, but just an ordering of these things when they can get concated.
You can write it as dot array, arrays or something.
Yep. Okay. Noted all of that.
So should we
contain? Yeah.
What about renaming? I mean, bytes. This word bytes comes from the Go standard library, but if we're going to be generic over int32 arrays, then potentially we shouldn't call this bytes anymore. Maybe we should call it binary, or I don't know.
Just arrays, and in arrays there's different files. One is like for or maybe or whatever. Yeah. And also we should like probably remove the bytes from the copy bytes. Yeah, that one is just
right.
this.
So Ryan's suggesting to rename bytes into binary, right?
I mean, I'm not sure. I wonder if people would have a problem if these were if for example these were generic over in 32. Does bytes still make sense to you, or does that give you a bad feeling?
I think binary would make more sense.
Yeah, probably binary.
Yeah, I don't know.
You
Binary
could also
feels
call it
like-
array buffers, but
I
that
think-
sounds like very long.
I
Or typed
think
arrays.
But array buffers, no, but they're not. But what about typed array?
Typed array.
Very
Sure.
very long. Classic
Binary-
classic byte shedding discussion.
For the layperson, bytes and binary probably mean the same thing, even though we know that it does not. Like for the layperson, it probably does.
Right.
Like binary does give me some like weird feeling about something like a bit vector or whatever strange reason.
Right.
And bytes is shorter.
Byte is the
Okay, contains. Check source array contains pattern array. Source and path returns a boolean.
Yeah, I don't think I have like interface issues with it other than probably renaming, but like the yeah, I think that I remember there's some the implementation wise, okay, that's probably not really important to be discussed here because the implementation wise is probably not really efficient. Yeah, but that's basically it.
I
Yeah,
have one point. If we want to align the names with like string and array types from ECMA script, maybe we should also slightly align interfaces. Contains, the equivalent would be includes, and includes as a position parameter. So, I mean, I think
Yeah,
that
I think includes
it could also be
for an
applicable here.
element, right? Not for a substring. I think you would look for in the string API for something like this.
Yes, but string has includes, doesn't it?
Yes, and includes as is a search string, not a single character.
Okay, noted. So align this interface more to the array interface. So instead of contains, it would be includes. If I remember that correctly, but I always mix the two.
Yeah.
And it should have one more parameter, the start position.
I suppose all of these functions should be generics, right? If we're doing the general buffer interface for all of them.
Right, so I already noted that all of the APIs in here should be generic, so they can operate on the typed arrays.
Yeah, but in this example, can I compare an int32 array with a uint array, with a uint8 array?
Yes. Like byte-wise, they are the same. You're comparing the actual bytes and not the.
And endianness would become relevant, and then either you add another parameter to give the function the endianness, or you just cast the array.
Just kind of force the source and pattern to have the same type, and like
Yeah, I agree with Kevin.
Like it's not hard to like this conversion is very simple to do yourself. So
Well, yeah, I think int32 array has like a buffer that's an uint8 array that contains all of that, but well.
yeah, you can do uint8 array.buffer and then pass that into the like u32 array constructor, and then that's a cast.
Okay, moving on, copy bytes. It takes the source buffer, it takes the destination buffer, and it takes off, which is an offset and is missing a type in here.
Probably that's probably a denote doc bug though.
Yeah.
I think that's probably defaults to 0 and
Yeah, that's probably not handle.
Yeah.
So maybe just rename this to copy somebody said before, rather
Yeah,
than
I
all
think
the
I said
redundant
about
bytes.
like, yeah, because bytes is just like too specific here, and like, yeah, even if we still want to keep the bytes like module as is at this moment, I don't think we need to reiterate the bytes name here again.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I noted to rename this utility to copy instead of copy bytes.
I mean, very strange. Why does it have an offset parameter but not the length parameter? I mean, it seems for convenience, which is what this does, right? You would want to have both, and if you want to be minimal, then you would have neither, because you can always just like view or sort of slice the data, right?
Would we be able to standardize it and add that length parameter later after offset?
Oh, that's true. Actually, that would work. Yeah.
Although that does deviate from our optional parameters style specification.
Yeah, it would need to be in options, like.
So maybe
Bert, can you repeat the len? Because I did not really understand what that parameter would do.
Well, I mean, this copies. I also don't know where is it offset into destination. Oh yeah. So I mean, there's a parameter where you can specify the offset, but you cannot specify how many bytes to copy. So we'll just, I guess.
Okay.
Well, actually, I don't know. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. I just noted it, and we'll later. So if we were to do that, then probably the third parameter should be the options bag as per our style guide.
Yeah, an off option and a limit option or whatever.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah, I mean that in an option object, both things could be included: the offset and
Yeah.
where the copy begins and the number of bytes you want to copy.
Yeah. Okay, equal takes the source, takes the match, check whether binary arrays are equal to each other. Source, first array to check equality, match, second array to check equality. I think the function is fine, but the param names could be adjusted.
Yeah, maybe just A and B.
Yeah, and also like I don't know if people have arguments against like should be equals or equal, but I mean I checked the Go standard library and it's like equal, but yeah, there's always going to be this fun little thing.
I actually thought the same thing, Kevin, and I'm erring on the equals just because in the testing we got assert equals.
Oh, that's a good point.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Usually you do the equals when you're that's a property of a class. So for example, if it was you array that equals and you passed another array, maybe that would work. But I prefer single equal.
Okay.
Right, so you're saying equals would make more sense if it were a like method on an array or on a class.
Yeah, I mean, we really need to make it like a kind of a naming convention on this type of things for the future.
I mean,
yeah, I mean, either way, we should keep it consistent throughout the standard library. So we, if we have assert equals, then I would assume this should be equals. But if we have assert equal, then yeah, let's just choose one.
Another question I have is, what kind of comparison does this do? Like, it compares just to bytes and ignores properties and the prototype and that kind of stuff?
I think so, yeah. It's byte one.
Let's check it. Yes, it checks the equality of the elements.
Okay. Okay, so it is like really specific to type.
So it's like verifying the contents are the same, and only that. Should probably include this in the doc string, I think.
Or maybe rename it. But you just say it. I mean, I could also use array and an n32 array say equal, but they're not equal because there are two different kinds of arrays. So maybe equal
Right, but
contains equal.
yeah, but didn't we like when we were discussing that those APIs should be generic on the typed arrays?
No, I mean the
Shouldn't
name.
they?
I mean exactly the name, because if I say these two equal, I pass two different types of arrays, maybe I'm expecting a false or a true.
You
I mean,
you can't pass two. You shouldn't be passing two different types of arrays. They should both be the same type.
Okay.
I think, or at least that's what I gathered from what we established, like 2 functions up.
Yeah, that sounds the most reasonable to me too.
Okay, find index, source, and path. Find first index of the binary pattern from A. If not found, then return -1.
Yeah, the naming.
What's A? That dot string
In-
references A, but A like isn't a parameter.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
The,
Aha, right,
like,
yeah.
document.
Yeah, okay. Is the name okay? Shouldn't it be like on the string, which is index of?
Yeah, I think index of sounds better, to be honest. Because actually, like I think I looked up find index, and there's actually another thing called find index on the typed arrays currently, and that one actually allows you to pass in a test function. So yeah, but for our case here, we're kind of like a narrower one that is actually closely aligning to the array and strings like index of. So I think that makes more sense.
Yeah.
I'm in
Yeah.
favor of index of.
Yeah.
And
also another
array
thing.
also. Oh, yeah,
Oops.
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Another thing that I was thinking about here is that if we're going to make the whole like module kind of like more general typed arrays, then there's actually going to be slightly more issues in the future when we're going to do the implementation of this index of if we want to boost its performance. Because currently it's basically just a brute force like n times m like operation, but then like based on the like unit size, and there might be different algorithms we can use in actually finding the index. And I don't know like if this will play well if we kind of like just having this module taking all types of typed arrays.
Right.
Yeah, because there's a bunch of really fun, interesting algorithms here, like Rabin-Karp, like Boyer-Moore, and all the fun little things that works well in different cases. For example, the alphabet size that actually is pretty important at times.
So, I mean, that would be an argument in favor of keeping this not generic, actually.
Yeah. And if we always pass the same types, I assume we'll be able to optimize it more efficiently.
Well, if we were to make it generic, we'd have to like do the runtime guards inside those functions anyway.
Well, you can just cast really internally.
Right.
But it might be easier just to make it uint8 and then let the user do the casting.
Yeah, it is kind of nice to have like, you know, uint8 specific. I think Kevin's point is really good that like, you know, these algorithms are not necessarily generic over all of them.
Okay, so I'm gonna mark the thing that we
really well
suggest to make it generic as discussable.
And they should probably take starting index as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So find last index. I think this is the same drill. It should be last index of, if I'm not mistaken.
How does it work? How's this work with string? Is there a
well, it it returns the index of the last occurrence of the pattern within the string. So like it searches from the end.
Yeah. It's pretty much the same as find index, except it starts at the back.
Right. I'm just wondering if there's a standard, like for just standard array index of if there's already a way to do this in the reverse.
Yeah, it's also called last index of array.prototype.
Oh, it is.
Last index of, yeah.
Last index of, right. So this should probably be called last index of.
And that also takes from index field or from
Yeah.
index.
Okay, has prefix, takes the source and the prefix, check whether binary array starts with the prefix.
Starts with.
Yeah.
Yeah, do strings have starts with, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then has suffix, ends with.
Yeah.
Okay. Repeat. Origin, count, returns uint 8
But the
array.
has prefix and has about the has prefix and has suffix on strings. There's also a position argument where it should start searching.
Okay.
I don't know.
Should it? I mean,
I don't know. Like the string prototype does.
But well, if it starts with but it isn't the start, then why not just a search function?
Yeah, I mean, starts with seems like it should start at the start.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird,
Sure.
like they actually have that option argument on string that starts with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it does?
It has.
Yeah, it's probably some engineer who I don't know. Didn't have their morning coffee when they wrote this.
I see. Starts with has a position argument. Jesus, why?
Maybe it's a position argument for the prefix array, the suffix array. I don't know.
Yeah, position in the string that at which to begin searching with search string. So it's on the
Source.
yeah, it's on the not source. It's on the it's on the prefix or on the suffix. I think.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
The position in this string at which to begin searching for search string.
But I mean, like, yeah, I was looking at the. I guess I was just quickly looking at the MDN one. So yeah.
Yeah, MDN says it starts searching, but the position, I mean, the number you're passing is looking for the new array.
So we could potentially leave out that position argument for now and stabilize this because we could add that later.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, this position argument.
It's very weird.
Okay, the last one, function repeat, takes the origin and takes count and returns uint 8 array. Repeat bytes returns a new byte slice consisting of count copies of B. Obviously, the doc needs to be updated. So I assume this just concatenates origin count times.
Yeah, maybe we should say that it throws a range error if the repeat count is negative.
Sure.
Yeah, and to the naming of this one, I think like string does have repeat, and then array has, I think, fill, right? So this is where string and array diverts the original APIs, and here we have.
I think fill receives an object that has a function that lets you specify what to fill it in with. Not another array. But I'm not sure. Let me check that.
I think fill takes a constructor function. No, maybe not.
By the way, we are at 2 hours now. I think it makes sense to just finish up this discussion here since it's being recorded. But I do think that these are long discussions and we should try to keep it on time. So if people wanted to schedule around this, they could potentially do that.
Right, and I think we're actually done. We just reviewed the last method. So yeah, thank you very much for coming today. Super productive discussion. Hopefully we'll have 2 first modules to stabilize, and we discussed how we could version and structure STD going forward. So yeah, thank you very much for coming, and I guess do we meet in 2 weeks before Christmas? I guess so.
Yeah.
For anyone interested, the recording, I'll add a link. I'll add that to the issue, so you can rewatch this later.
Yeah. Does anybody have some closing thoughts before we all sign off?
Oh, by the way,
Anybody wanna
like,
say something?
yeah, sorry. I noticed like the Google Groups itself is like not directly visible, like to all of other people not under the Dino.com domain. I mean, we can still see the emails, but like to check all the like historical ones in
Right.
centralized pages, it's not possible, I think, at this moment.
Yeah, I'll set up a. I stupidly set that up under this Dino.com. I'll set up a different one and copy over the email addresses. Apologies for that.
Thanks.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Yeah, so
Bye.
see you all in 2 weeks, and we'll try to find suitable time for the next meeting using some kind of poll.
Okay, talk to you later. Bye bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.